So what are the incapable Czech opposition and the very capable Andrej Babiš up to again? Ladies and gentlemen, Czech politics is a bit like a puppet theater, and the attention of the media, the people, and actually even the opposition is focused on the most colorful, the most angular, and the most Nazi-saluting puppet, instead of focusing on what's happening behind the curtain, or rather what's happening behind the screen where the puppets are stored, where the puppets are dividing up the money, and where they handle the admission fees we've paid so we can watch this great puppet theater show. In other words, people are dealing with Filip Turek, his pointless and stupid scandals, cultural and political wars, instead of the opposition trying to draw attention to the important things, like what Andrej Babiš is doing, what Šebestyán is doing, how the state administration is working or not working at this moment, and how strong the coalition discipline is. Overall, it could be said that the opposition has not yet managed to break free from Babiš's game. They are fighting his battle in his own theater. They are the actors, and of course, they are rallying behind Petr Pavel in a battle that Petr Pavel chose to fight, and they definitely should not be rallying behind Petr Pavel, because that's a completely different type of fight that the president chose to wage, and the opposition should be fighting its own battle on completely different fronts, because it has completely different tools, completely different powers, and of course completely different goals. Ladies and gentlemen, if you want to know more about the incompetence of the Czech opposition, about the abilities of Andrej Babiš, and about the pieces on this political chessboard, then definitely keep watching. So let's get started. Filip Turek became the perfect smokescreen and a pawn in the game of Andrej Babiš, and in a way also in the game of Petr Pavel. First, let's talk about Andrej Babiš. Filip Turek is a controversial figure and a problematic person. He has a problematic past and present, problematic statements both past and present, and probably future ones as well, and overall the motorist party itself is represented by this person, which, represented by this guy, is simply an interesting bunch of oddballs. And these delinquents from time to time break a window somewhere or throw firecrackers at someone or set poop on fire in front of someone's house. And Andrej Babiš can always come and say, well, guys, this isn't good. You should behave better. And by doing that, he can nicely demonstrate his moral stance. He can show himself to the drivers and motorists as the statesman who actually does things right, who has the wisdom, who is the adult in the room, and who can keep them under control. Maybe you've already caught yourself more than once actually rooting for Andrej Babiš to show those motorists to really put that Nazi Turek in his place. And the moment you find out that Andrej Babiš put Turek in his place, you say to yourself, Andrej did well. And you don't really have much time to think about what's actually going on in the background. Besides that, President Petr Pavel, who decided not to appoint Turk, basically did Andrej Babiš a bit of a favor in his own way. I would say that there was some kind of agreement here that this non-appointment is in the best interest of both the president and Andrej Babiš, of course. And both of them could beautifully demonstrate their moral stances on Filip Turek, take their positions, and look like the two adults in the room, like the ones who have common sense. And Filip Turek and his crew, on the other hand, could present their anti-system, wild and bold attitudes, which might appeal to a few younger or more rebellious voters who simply haven't matured yet. Ještě, jo? Simply put, this whole character and all this parade around Filip Turek and the motorists is a brilliant smokescreen which is extremely media-friendly and behind which a great many things can be hidden. And not only does it serve as a cover at the beginning because journalists don't have to or don't want to pay attention to it since Filip Turek is much more appealing, but even more so from the perspective of the public because people won't want to read about some official bending legislation somewhere, subsidies, money, and legal provisions. Boring. No, 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 no. An argument between Turek and the president, showing off, flexing, showing who's the bigger alpha. Yeah, that's got drama. Plus, Andrej Babiš plays it very cleverly because whenever this group messes up or says something stupid, he tries to play it like, well, that's their thing, that's their business, that's their problem. They're talking to their own voters. But when he comes to rein them in, when he tells them, like, not like this, then he says, well, I'm the one leading this government. In other words, he tries to distance himself from the problematic things and basically tries to take credit for what he manages to solve. But the problem here is that people are looking at it the wrong way if they see it as separated like this. This government is Andrej Babiš's government. It's Andrej Babiš's government as a whole with both the good and the bad. And people should realize that Filip Turek's embarrassments are, of course, also Andrej Babiš's embarrassments. But besides that, they should pay much more attention to what's behind all this, what's behind the smokescreen of Nazi salutes and insults. Andrej Babiš has had a long-standing problem with conflicts of interest. That means he makes decisions about the flow of money that directly concerns him. It's similar to having one of the referees officiate the final at the Olympics. And that referee was from one of the countries that made it to the finals, for example, in the hockey final. You wouldn't like it either if someone was making calls against you like that. And Andrej Babiš is exactly that type of referee who makes calls while his own team is playing. So the president and Andrej Babiš agreed that in order to avoid Andrej Babiš being in a conflict of interest again, he would put Agrofert into some kind of trust fund, and that would solve it according to Czech law. The problem is that Czech laws are completely stupid, and that's another example of the weakness of our current opposition, that they couldn't even make a law that was supposed to go against Andrej Babiš. It's absolutely crazy that a whole army of those people can't, let's say, prevent the tricks of one old hustler. However, we won't talk about that right now. What's more important here is that the president only talked to Babiš about Agrofert like this, and even if Agrofert was dealt with, there are still other companies and other holdings that Babiš owns, and which aren't in any fund. So the conflict of interest and the problem with subsidies and adjusting legislation for the benefit of those companies still exists. And it's just another appealing show that Andrej Babiš and Petr Pavel put on here to make it look like Petr Pavel is also doing something against Babiš, but in reality, he didn't really do much. Petr Pavel always picks only the battles he's willing to fight and win, which are usually pretty easy and look good. Yeah, but even here it's clear that we really shouldn't rely on Petr Pavel as someone who will solve problems for the parliamentary opposition. He shouldn't even do that, but of course he's not even trying to. And the way Andrej Babiš is being favored brings us to another part of the opposition's incompetence, where a large part of the opposition is really cheering for Stepan. She was so strongly in favor of Tomio Okamura being prosecuted for the billboards, which were, of course, racist. Police requested Parliament revoke Okamura's immunity over the billboard campaign. So that's how principled we were, us, you, the opposition, until in the end Tomio Okamura was absolutely perfectly prepared, pre-cooked for Andrej Babiš. Andrej Babiš didn't even have to cook him because the opposition did it, and then Andrej Babiš just finished him off, spiced him up, and ate him. And at this moment, Tomio Okamura, because Andrej Babiš can hold him by the throat through those billboards and the risk of criminal prosecution, is beautifully, beautifully submissive. And so, for example, he even does things like appointing people like Šebestyán, who are absolutely, absolutely Babiš's people, to represent SPD. Yeah, we have Martin Šebestyán here, who is the Minister of Agriculture, and at this moment he is absolutely and totally loyally working for Prime Minister Babiš. But he's a minister for SPD, so if by any chance something isn't liked, if by any chance things start to favor Agrofert and Andrej's companies too much, then Andrej Babiš can always say, but that's not my minister, that's the SPD minister appointed by Tomio Okamura. Tomio Okamura is to blame. A beautiful smokescreen, another move with the Queen, and a check against the opposition. perfect job. And the problem is that here we're getting to the heart of the matter. This minister, who is completely Babiš's man but serves under SPD, is now discovering that the audits and assessments which were previously evaluated in such a way that Andrej Babiš and his companies shouldn't have access to certain forms of subsidies, or, for example, should return some subsidies, or simply that it should work in a certain way. Now it turns out, when we have Martin Šebestyán in the right places, that those assessments actually aren't correct. And that we have new assessments that show that the correct way is the one that suits Andrej Babiš and his companies. What a coincidence that just when Šebestyán, Babiš's man, gets into the ministry, the reports and various decisions that used to be one way are suddenly completely different, and that completely different is exactly the way that suits the companies and Andrej Babiš, and how it leads to even greater wealth and an even bigger increase in the assets of this oligarch. Coincidences do happen. I say coincidences. Coincidences do happen, but at the very least, it would be appropriate to think about it. How the hell is it possible that just when the right people were put in the right places to be approved by the right oversight bodies, which make decisions at the right time for the right companies, suddenly at that moment it turns out that everything is completely different than it used to be? That's interesting. That's fascinating, and of course there will be a lot of people in the comments saying, well, but it's absolutely legitimate and you don't have any real evidence and it's all just speculation, and look, you criticize Seznam Zprávy. How dare you even read independent media that work freely for their readers and from money that isn't from the state, and so on and so on. Of course, it's absolutely legitimate criticism, but think about it. Aren't you, in a way, accomplices who excuse certain crimes or shady dealings just so you don't have to admit that you let someone walk all over you and that you got taken in by someone, for example, when you voted for them? I know that cognitive dissonance is a very painful process, but you have to go through it if you want to grow, and some people just can't handle it. Some people would rather collaborate with criminals and hustlers. Who knows? Instead of, for example, thinking about whether some things might be just a little bit suspicious after all. And by doing so, of course, they become accomplices and are not exonerated at all. You can't say, even if it comes out one day it will all fall apart, one day it will get worse, that you're not responsible for anything, that it's all them. No, you helped keep that system alive and you support it. So, you too. You are part of that whole conspiracy, that whole potential crime. All these suspicious transactions that suddenly became legal and great, when just a moment ago, when there were other people involved, those transactions weren't legal or weren't great at all. And you know what? I'm actually quite surprised at Mr. Šebestyán and all those officials who are rubber stamping this as if everything were in order. They're approving it. After all, it must be clear to them, že Andrej Babiš tady dlouho. It won't be. Whether by the sword, he will die. If you recognize the reference, I appreciate it. And at that moment, people might start asking why all these things happened. Why suddenly, when you and Mr. Šebestyán came to the ministry, did these approvals start happening the way they did, even though before they were completely different? And those officials, along with the minister, will have to explain it. The minister doesn't have immunity, the officials don't have immunity, and they'll have to explain it because they're all working together on this. The smart officials will get an order, an instruction, a stamp from the minister that they really have to do it. The foolish officials will do it proactively to get a promotion, but what about those wheels of justice? They grind slowly but surely, and once this control from Andrej Babiš is gone, they'll probably start turning up the heat on these proactive comrades. So I really wonder about those officials that they're so proactive and don't want some kind of confirmation from the ministers that it has to be this way. And overall, I admire Martin Šebestyán for how loyal a puppet he is. And maybe I feel a bit sorry for him that he doesn't realize what he's getting himself into. I'm not entirely sure what Andrej Babiš knows about him or what he promised him for it, but he won't have a pleasant life once this Andrej Babiš's protective cloak disappears. He definitely won't, and it's hard to say whether he realizes it or is willing to risk that in the end. He'll somehow sweep it under the rug again, talk his way out of it again because he knows how to do it, and because until Andrej Babiš disappears and the cloak of invisibility over the officials and Šebestyán dissolves, the laws will be set up so that all these actions, which are now either illegal or at least in a gray area, will be beautifully legalized. It will be democratic, legalized, and it will be great. Well, but even so, I think that in the future, someone could have serious problems because they did these things when things turn around again, when things that might get legalized. It's hard to say if that will work out, are later judged to be things that should never have been legalized. Well, anyway, all of that lies in the future, and these are risky games I personally wouldn't get into if I were in the officials' place, but apparently they have great trust in their leaders and in the system they're helping to create. Well, anyway, what about President Petr Pavel? So don't expect anything from him on these issues. Petr Pavel currently has the support of the majority of our society. That means he is also supported by many Andrej Babiš voters. Petr Pavel definitely won't be starting any major conflicts with Andrej regarding conflicts of interest or other issues here. To před jmenování premiérem he was there to show his, let's say, opposition voters that he doesn't completely ignore it, but in reality, he has no effective influence on this whole case. And he even decided that he won't bring up the topic again. In other words, Petr Pavel showed that he doesn't intend to get involved in this issue, that this is a field he leaves to the opposition, where the battle should be between the opposition and the government, not between the president and the opposition. Petr Pavel is enjoying his own culture wars here with Filip Turek, in which he wins handily and collects political points because he looks like the adult in the room. And he doesn't intend to get involved in battles he can't win, in the sense of dealing with legislation, legal provisions, redistribution of money, and things like that. Yeah, he'll fight his own battle about whether he'll go or not because security interests him and so on, but again, he'll keep pushing the line that McKinker is the one who doesn't want to take him there and that McKinker is an idiot and that Prime Minister Andrej Babiš should deal with it and so on and so on, but he'll never go all out directly against Andrej Babiš. That could cost him political points. It could complicate his re-election, which he's going for with complete confidence. So in this regard, don't expect anything from Petr Pavel at all. He won't deal with this, and if the opposition doesn't pull itself together and stop rallying behind Petr Pavel as the leader of the opposition, which Petr Pavel simply isn't and never will be, then it's going to end very badly. The opposition needs to find its own leader, someone who will be a strong personality. It's hard to say if that will be Grolich. It definitely won't be Kuba. Like completely Kubek, I think his name is, or Kubik. What's the name of that guy from the Civic Democrats? Koba? No, it's not him either, because I can't even remember his name, so definitely not. Maybe Vit Rakushan, hard to say. Hřibidi. Hřibidi is too much behind Petr Pavel. He didn't understand that you can't do opposition through the presidential office, which doesn't want to be oppositional in the way it would need to be. Therefore, the opposition hasn't found the strength yet, hasn't found the ability. It's completely incapable. It's playing Andrej's game, watching Andrej's puppets. And of course, when it comes to the media, we can't expect anything from them because they're just after clicks, they're after views. And as long as people aren't interested in whether something is wrong in this country, the media won't really tell you about it because they'll know you don't care. And if you don't care about the plundering of the state or shady things happening in the offices, then I think you're complicit in these things and you should be ashamed of yourselves. Well, never mind. One day it will come. One day you'll understand. Maybe it won't happen now. Maybe when you finally understand, you'll decide to blame everything on those senior officials and wash your own hands so you don't have to be disgusted with yourselves. But right now, that's definitely not the phase we're in. We'll see if we ever get to that point. In any case, ladies and gentlemen, if you enjoyed this content and if you now understand a bit more about how these political chess games are played, who's on which board and all that, then give it a like, leave a comment, share this video, or support the channel through the QR codes, and I'll look forward to seeing you in some other videos. Definitely let me know if you've experienced some cognitive dissonance regarding this government or the previous one, or if, on the contrary, you've decided to turn a blind eye to all those suspicious things and would rather play their game, or if you simply stand for something, definitely let me know. So take care and bye for now.